I'm here.
Okay, so it looks like everybody is here on our end because Ms. Ripley could not attend today's meeting. So Chancellor Lambert, your whole team is there. Are we ready to go?
We are ready, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
So I'd like to, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon and welcome to the January 19th, 2021 Governing Board study session. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Our first item of business is an action item 2.1, an intergovernmental agreement with Pima County related to the administration of COVID-19 vaccinations. Mr. Sylvan, could you read the recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Chancellor recommends that the Governing Board authorize the Chancellor or designee to execute an intergovernmental agreement with Pima County for Pima College Nursing Program students to support County Health Department administration of COVID-19 vaccines.
Is there someone who'd like to move the recommendation?
Motion.
Accept.
So I believe that was Mr. Gonzalez. Is there a second? Okay, I'll go ahead and second it. Is there any discussion?
I have a question.
Yes,
If the students get COVID because of doing this job, are they covered in any way? Insurance-wise or medical cost?
Chancellor Lambert?
So the way we've structured this agreement is that the county would be responsible for any non-intentional acts on the part of our students and the college. So if you take that by extension, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, then something that like this that happens, then we would argue that this would fall under the county's purview.
Okay, I'm just concerned that, I'd like to make sure that they're covered, because it just seems, from experiences recently that, the numbers are so high, and it just seems that people are taking care of themselves and they're still getting it.
Oh, absolutely. I think, Maria, that's a very good point. And I would hope as we work with the county that they would inoculate the students who are participating in the program, meaning let them get the vaccination, because they would fall under the healthcare piece.
Okay.
We will do our best to make sure. And just so all of you are aware, how did this come about was I got contacted by the county administrator, Chuck Huckleberry, asking if we could do something in partnership with them. And also keep in mind, we already have an IGA with them to do more general things. This was intended to be more specific. And oh, by the way, the general one will need to be re-upped later as we go into next month.
All right.
Okay, are there any other questions or concerns? So I would, just to sort of reiterate, Ms. Garcia, if we could just double check and make sure, confirm, I think both of those things, that one, that the students can get the vaccine as part of this process, but that the county truly is the responsible party per the agreement. So, if you're confirming that that's the case, I certainly feel comfortable, and thank you, Ms. Garcia, for bringing that to everybody's attention. So if there's no more discussion, Mr. Sylvan, because we're missing a member, we'd like to do a roll call vote.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Ms. Garcia.
Yes.
Dr. Hay.
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Yes.
Mr. Klinko.
Yes. Okay, the motion passes 4-0 with Ms. Ripley absent. The next item on the agenda is our discussions. The first is 3.1, the future of PCC. Chancellor Lambert, I will hand it to you.
So Damien, we're excited about the planning work that's been underway at the college. As we move to a more integrated planning model, we're also looking at how we anticipate the future as part of that work. And so really wanted Nick to be able to share with all of you and engage you all in the process. So that's what we're going to be taking you through this afternoon. So Dr. Richmond, I turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chancellor Lambert.
Chair Klinko, members of the board, I'm pleased to be with you this afternoon to lead a conversation with you on the future of Pima Community College. I will share my screen. Give me just a moment. Okay, there we go. Hopefully, do you all see my screen at the moment?
Yes.
Slide.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Unfortunately, I can't see any of you while I'm sharing my screen, but please, of course, ask questions as we proceed. So in terms of an outline for today, the topics we're going to talk about is a brief introduction to the planning process at Pima. This is a strategic planning year for the institution, and so I'm going to share a little background with you on the things that we're looking at. We're going to talk in some degree of detail about Achieve 60 Pima County. I'll share with you the statewide picture on that, mention how this got started at Pima, and seek your input on this particular initiative. Then we'll move on and talk about the Foresight methods that we're leveraging at the institution as part of the planning process. And that's what will lead us into our discussion about the future of the institution. In terms of the planning process at Pima, so as mentioned, this is a strategic planning year for us. The new plan will go into effect on July 1 of this year. We are in the process of wrapping up the final year of our 4-year current strategic plan. Now, the overall planning process, of course, is guided by the mission of the institution. The mission is currently under review. That will be coming forward to the board likely in February and for discussion, and then later in the spring for adoption. Now, a couple of notes about the mission. There's a number of different topics that will be captured within there, of course. We provide so many services to so many different people. You will find when the draft comes forward to you that it does include open admissions, which we recognize as an institutional priority and very important for the community we serve. And also we will have language that speaks to the variety of offerings that we provide. This will include adult education, developmental education, the different awards we offer, workforce training, transfer pathways. And you will see that language and it will come forward to you for discussion first, and then for your adoption later in the semester. The mission guides the planning initiatives, but there's a number of planning activities we engage in within this. The first box on here is current status. These are elements of traditional planning. So institutional context, a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis, and other things that help us understand the current institution, who we are today, and some of the things happening in the world around us. We're also building in this time a discussion about the possible future environment of the institution, and that's really what the second half of our discussion today is going to focus on. And also, we need to weave in some of the institutional priorities over the next 4 to 5 years. Institutionally, this has been the case for a little while because so much change had to happen 5 or 6 years ago. We have a number of different plan documents, and we're working to streamline our planning process, integrate across these different planning channels so we have a clear, consistent, integrated approach. And for that reason, as we think about the strategic plan, we need to think about institutional priorities, the education master plan and facilities master plan, and Achieve 60 Pima County. Now, Achieve 60 was approved in our previous strategic plan, and I want to spend a few minutes reviewing some of the data related to Achieve 60 Arizona, the statewide effort, and also share some local information that speaks to the institution's performance for progress and outcomes for our students that impact this particular initiative. Within the timeline of the strategic plan, there's key steps that we need to address to support progress on this initiative if this continues as an institutional priority. As you likely all know, Achieve 60 Arizona is a statewide effort which has the goal that by 2030, 60% of Arizona adults aged 25 through 64 will hold a post-secondary credential or degree. Now, statewide, if we look at the percentage of Arizona residents within that age range, it's currently 46% who have completed a 2 or 4 year degree or credential. So we are not at that 60% mark, and we're a fair way from that 60% mark. And in terms of total numbers within Arizona, we need 1 million degrees or certifications or credentials by 2030. And there's a few different opportunity areas we can look to. Within Arizona, 600,000 adults do not have a high school diploma. And we have 1.2 million individuals with some college, but no degree. And both of these are important potential populations that we might consider as we think about Achieve 60. In particular, adults with some college but no degree may be individuals who could be quite close to completing an award or certificate. So they're a key group to think about. Now, one important factor behind Achieve 60 Arizona, which also needs to be reflected locally, is that this isn't just reaching 60% across the total community, regardless of who is earning those awards. As it says here, 60% means 60% for everyone. Now, the chart you see here shows statewide information, but you will notice that while one of the populations, race ethnicity populations, has an attainment rate of 67%, all of the other groups are below that 60% threshold. And some of them are more below that threshold than others. So for example, our white population is 48%, Hispanic Latinx is 22%, 36% for our Black or African American population, 18% for Native American. And so through Achieve 60, they are clear. The goal is to raise the attainment level for our diverse population, so all of our community members across the different groups we may disaggregate across, reach that 60% level of the population holding a degree or certificate. So this is really two goals wrapped up into one. It's about college completion and educational attainment, but weaving in the equity priority to ensure that all of our community members are benefiting through this initiative. Achieve 60 Arizona has a real transformative potential, and this covers a number of different levels. So there's a positive impact on individuals as they develop new skills, earn college credentials, and progress within their careers. The door will open to them for different professions. It will, we know, statistically, it's likely to improve their lifetime earnings. It promotes equity in Arizona, as I was just talking about in terms of the outcomes. And it helps us build out a skilled workforce, which in turn supports economic growth, because the higher education level within our community, the better the opportunities to attract businesses to our community. So really from the individual to the community level, there's a lot of potential for positive impact through this initiative. So as mentioned, as part of our current strategic plan, the 2017 through 21 plan, the institutional goal was approved of Achieve 60 Pima County. It essentially mirrors the statewide effort, but this is localized on the community that we serve. So I want to review some of the local data that relates to this initiative. And so we're going to take a look first at some county data, and then we're going to look at our student data institutionally to take a look at where we currently stand, what our current performance is like in some of these key metrics, to think about what needs to happen next for us to make progress. So what you see here is some county data looking at educational attainment. Now we're looking at the education among people aged 25 years and older. So this is not specifically on that age range through to 64. We include the retirees in this particular set of information. And there are two sets of numbers. So the bars correspond to Pima County. The lines above that correspond to Arizona. And we are looking at the various educational levels here. You'll notice the largest proportion of residents fall in the some college, no degree category. We have about 18% with bachelor's degrees, about 9% with associate degrees. And I'll share the total proportion of people within the specific age range of interest in a couple of slides' time. But you can see there's clear opportunity across our high school graduates and those individuals with some college for us to be able to shift some of this population into some of these higher education level categories. Here, we're looking at college graduates by race. Now, in this case, it's specific to a bachelor's degree or higher, and we're looking at information by race, ethnicity, and also by gender. So females in pink, males in blue, and again, we have Arizona as the lines, Pima County in the bars. Now, the goal across individuals, across categories, race, ethnicity, and gender is to reach 60% education attainment. Now, this is bachelor's degree, so it's a little misleading because it doesn't include associate degrees, but you can see the same kinds of differences across race ethnicity categories that we saw at the statewide level a few minutes ago. So our Asian population has the highest bachelor's degree attainment rate, followed by our white non-Hispanic population. But our other subpopulations, including in this case presented here, Black and Hispanic, are not seeing the same levels of educational attainment that we see for other populations. When we look across all Pima County residents, and in this case, we look at the specific age range of interest of 25 through 64. We find that 43% of our residents hold an associate degree or higher based on Census Bureau 1-year estimates. To reach 60% within our community, this means we need an additional 86,500 credentialed residents by 2030. Now, if we assume for today's purposes, just to run some numbers, that we're responsible for half of that number within Pima County, it means we need to graduate approximately 43,000 students between now and 2030 to attain this goal. Except it's not quite as simple as that. Now, the table you see here, this presents completers and completions for Pima for the last 5 years. Now, a completer is a unique student. A completion could be, if a student earns 2 awards, they'll be counted in here twice. That's why that number is slightly higher. For our purposes, sorry, let me go back again. We're looking at completers because we're looking at individuals receiving an award. Now, they could earn a certificate and an associate degree. That's great, but they only count once regardless. Now, if we continue graduating around about 3,800 students a year, by 2030, we'll have produced 38,000 graduates. Now, that sounds quite close to the 43,000 that I just mentioned, except there's a detail that we need to make sure we take into account. Because we're looking at this very specific age range as defined to Achieve 60 Arizona, if we graduate that number over the next 10 years, we'll basically maintain the status quo. Because every year we graduate students, we lose adults out of the upper end of that category as they become 65 and kind of progress out of this category. So essentially, if we continue graduating students at the rate we currently are, we'll maintain the status quo. To make significant progress on Achieve 60 Pima County, our completion numbers each year need to increase quite substantially. So that gives some of the county picture. So it hopefully gives you a sense of what educational attainment looks like within our community, how it varies by race, ethnicity, by gender, and the scale of the challenge that we're talking about. Let me highlight a few student metrics to give you a sense of institutional performance in terms of student progress, student outcomes, but to kind of frame where we're currently at institutionally for these areas. Now, there's a lot of information on here. I'm not going to talk about all of the lines on this chart. So we're looking at data from the Voluntary Framework of Accountability. This is a system that Pima has participated in for a number of years now, and these measures and others form part of our mission fulfillment framework and some of the key guiding metrics for the institution. We're looking in this case at 2-year progress And the labels across the bottom gives you the year that the cohort started. So for example, for 2010, we trace students from fall 2010 forwards for 2 years, and we observe what happens to them. Now, a number of these lines you'll notice are gradually trending upwards. A few examples, for example, towards the top of this chart. The purple line is the first term completed credit success. The light blue line is 2-year completed credit success. So this is indicating that over time, a higher proportion of students in a given semester or a given 2-year period are successfully completing the classes, which is great to see. There are other numbers, which I would also like to highlight, which are also increasing. So for example, the pink line at the bottom, fall 2010, it was 3.8. The most recent year included here for the cohort starting in fall 2018 is at 11%. This is a fairly sizable increase over 8 years. This is a proportion of those students who started in that semester who completed a certificate or degree within 2 years. And it's really encouraging to see that level of improvement over this period of time, because it indicates the changes the institution has made is moving us in the right direction, and we're seeing higher levels of success for our students. A line it's worth noting that's going down.
I believe that Ms. Garcia has a question.
Please, go ahead.
Ms. Garcia, you're muted.
Oh, okay, my question is, okay, from 2010, our enrollment was a lot higher. It was probably around 61K. Okay, so at the present time, our enrollment is less than 33. You know, I guess I'm having a hard time reading this chart because, you know, I mean, 11.1%, is that based on the total enrollment of, you know, of who was attending class? And also, I guess I'm asking for too much, but what's the age group in here? Is it from 25 to 65? I don't know.
Those are great questions. So for the cohort that we're tracking here, we identify all new students to the institution in a given fall semester. There are some criteria that we apply to select those students based on the VFA's definitions, but they're entirely external definitions. Essentially, we're looking at all new students starting at Pima Community College in a given fall. So the cohort size is different from fall 2010 through to fall 2018, exactly as you say, because we've experienced drops in enrollment. There is no limit on the age of the students. So if they're new to the institution and they're 18, we would count them within this cohort. If they're new to the institution and they are 55, we would include them within this cohort. So this includes kind of all new students. The key thing is because we identify that cohort of students in the given fall semester when they started, then we follow that cohort of students forward over time. So for example, it means that 11% of the students who started new in fall 2018 had earned a degree or certificate by the end of their first 2 years. Compared with the first cohort for 2010, a little under 4% of them had completed a degree or certificate within that first 2-year period. So what the data is showing is that shift where we're seeing a higher proportion of students successfully completing an award in that 2-year time frame. But you're absolutely right that the overall numbers against which these percentages run has dropped over time as the enrollment of the institution has dropped. So those are great questions. Did that clarify?
Okay. I'm fine.
Okay, all right, good. So we can drill into these data in a little more detail. So the VFA has us report information to them for 5 different demographic groups. So for example, here I've just included.
I think, just in the, for the future, I think it would be helpful if we had the aggregate number of students, maybe just in a parenthesis, so we sort of knew what 11% means, Mm-hmm. I mean, because we have seen this shift, I mean, we've, in some ways we've been able to invest resources more aggressively into less students, right? I mean, but we've been very strategic about all of this during this period of time. So we see this increase, but I think seeing the actual aggregate number would be helpful and better understanding sort of where we are.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to provide that. And we have those numbers, so I will follow up and see that they are sent to the board so you can see those. When we disaggregate across different populations, and this is relevant to the equity aspect within Achieve 60, we can look to see different outcomes across different populations. So for the 2-year progress measures, I've selected gender as a category that we look at, but we can look at gender, race, ethnicity, Pell status, whether they're full-time or part-time in their first term, and also the age range within which the students fall. And while I'm only sharing a subset of information today, so the board is aware, on the employee side, we have a report portal, Pima Reports, that enables all employees to have access to interact with these data and look at the results across different subpopulations. And just for this one, you can see there are some notable differences. So fall to next term retention rate. So this is a proportion of students from their first fall who continue with the institution in the following spring. You'll see the results are quite different for our female students compared to our male students. If, however, we skip across the table to completed certificate or degree rate, you'll see that a higher proportion of the male students have completed an award compared to the female students. Now, this may speak to the subject areas within which we have certificates or awards that have less credit hours associated with them. Perhaps they're in areas that are of more interest to our male students. But this is where we can start drilling into the data to understand what's happening for different populations, that we can then look at institutionally and go, well, what do we need to do? How do we shift the needle on these numbers for these particular populations? Now, in addition to tracking students at the 2-year mark, we can track students for longer. As part of the VFA standard, we report on the cohorts at the 6-year mark. So just to take a look at what those figures look like. So here we're looking at cohorts from fall 2010 through 2013. Again, looking at the new students in each of those semesters and tracking them forward for 6 years. And then looking at what the trend looks like in terms of the changes. Now, for this dark blue line running through the middle, we could look at the proportion of that cohort who complete a degree or a certificate with us within that 6-year period. Now, that's increased a little bit between fall 2010 and 2013, or the starting cohorts in those falls. We anticipate that it will likely increase further because, as you've just seen, the 2-year completion rate is steadily increasing. So over time, we'll see more of an impact on the 6-year outcome numbers and the changes that have been made. Other numbers are holding relatively steady. I mean, they fluctuate a little bit term to term, but this top one is individuals who leave the institution with less than 30 credit hours. This is, depending on the goals of this population, this could be concerning. If they were starting with the institution aiming to get a certificate or a degree or to transfer, then for those goals, these are unsuccessful students. Of course, we know we have students who want to take one class and they complete that class and that's all they want from the institution. Of course, they would successfully leave the institution with less than 30 credit hours. But these are some of the big picture metrics we can look to try and understand what's happening. In the same way, we can drill down into the 2-year metrics. We can do the same thing for 6-year outcomes. Now, in this case, I've included race ethnicity across these different populations. Now, the lowest categories in here, excluding Asian and Pacific Islander, are generally kind of 2 or more races, unknowns. So these are small categories where you have anomalous readings in this column. Don't worry about those. But if we look, for example, at total associate degrees and certificates and look down this column, we see some variations for some of our demographic groups. It's around about 18% for our white students, similar for our Hispanic students. It's lower for some of our other minority students. However, in particular, I would highlight our Black or African American population, for whom it's 11%. We can also look to students who did not receive an award from us, but went on to transfer. Now, these are students who are successfully continuing with their educational experience, but they left us without earning an award, which is arguably an area that's would merit from institutional focus, because we know those students won't all succeed at the university. And so we need to think carefully about the offerings that we have here to help more students earn a completion from us before they transfer. But you'll notice down this list, there's significant variability. Our Hispanic population, for example, and our American Indian or Alaska Native population, only around about 1 in 4 of those students will go on to transfer with no award. It's 1 in 3 for other populations, such as our white population. And these are differences, again, that we need to look to and understand. Why do some groups transfer at a lower rate? What are their experiences? What's leading them in that direction? And how can we help ensure that all of our students see positive outcomes? Though with the caveat that if this column drops no award and transferred, and instead we have increases in certificate and transfer or associate and transfer, that's all the better, because that means those students are earning an award, and they will always have that award with us, regardless of how successful they are when they get to the university. And we know life happens. Not all of those students will succeed. So that gives you hopefully a little bit of a feel for how some of the college's data looks. And as mentioned, I will follow up and send additional information, including the overall cohort numbers, so you have those. But as we think about Achieve 60 Pima County, and as we think about the future of the institution, there are a few things we need to reflect on. And these are topics we may come back to later. How do we substantially increase Pima's completion rate? And how do we close the achievement gap? Now, these questions will help inform the conversation we have a little bit later as we think about the future of the institution. For right now, I wanted to open up a different question for input from the board. The membership of the governing board has changed significantly since the Achieve 60 Pima County goal was approved as part of the last strategic plan. As we work on the development of the next strategic plan, I would really appreciate the input and the insights from the current board in terms of the prioritization and whether you see this as a priority area for the institution to focus on. And while we have this conversation, I'm going to stop sharing my screen briefly so I can see you all. Are there comments from the board?
Yes, Ms. Garcia. You're still muted. You're muted.
Okay. One of the things that I would like to see, and I don't know if it makes that much of a difference, but when we had the international students, I know that our numbers have gone down quite a bit, but you're counting them, I believe, as well as the completion and the transfers. And as a community member, you know, if we have people like from Mexico, you know, as international students coming down here, and they're completing and they're transferring, and they're putting in our, you know, they're putting in as the number for Pima. I mean, it's good for Pima to show that, but it doesn't give us, the board members that are responsible for our communities, to see the, you know, to really measure the number of, colored people that are not graduating or are completing. I would like to see that number, you know, a different number for that. I don't know if you could do that.
Absolutely. So if we were to separate this out based on the residency and the status of the students, absolutely.
Yes.
We can do
Thank
that.
you.
So Dr. Richmond, I mean, to your question, I would say for me, I think, the Pima 60 initiative really provides a guide star of where we need to go. I mean, we all know that the rates are inadequate to serve both the individuals and, you know, attract the types of businesses that our community is aggressively competing for. And so being able to use this as sort of the aspirational goal, my concern is how do we revolutionize what we're doing to be able to achieve that? I mean, we only have 10 years and we're already, you know, almost 2 months into the first of that, of what's left of that, you know, within that goal framework. So, you know, I fully support the intent, but I just want to see us be more aggressive in how we get there. and revolutionize. I mean, we had an opportunity a few years ago. We talked about the types of cuts that the institution needed. And we talked about a revolutionized model, a redesign model, and a do nothing model. And we went with the middle option. But then I was, I really felt we should be thinking more about how do we revolutionize to achieve this, because I just see us, we're making these small incremental improvements, and that's to everybody's credit. I mean, seeing that move to 11% over that period of time is because of all of the work of not just everyone on this call, but the institution as a whole. So how do we push, to be much more aggressive in seeing that those numbers just dramatically increase? And I would be really curious what the other members of the board think on that.
Am I still muted?
No, you are loud and clear.
Okay, I can't tell at the time. Okay, so on my view, I believe that in order for us to achieve that, we have to be out aggressively recruiting people, recruiting students. I still don't see us doing that as well. And I come from a different view, because I think for those of you that, advertisement and bulletin boards and all that stuff, maybe for the non-colored people, that may be okay, but it isn't for the Hispanic, and it isn't for the Native American. You have to reach them in a different way. I sincerely mean that. I don't have the answer, but I think that more on the ground kind of people, they can go into the classroom and talk to the students and go to the gatherings that they have with the parents. You have to do more than that, because they're not really aware. I mean, I'm just, it's kind of like, I'm going to tell you that, when I went to school, I didn't think twice, I didn't even think about going to college, taking any classes. And I still think that exists. We have a lot of immigrants coming over, and they're here and they're taking classes or whatever, but they still don't have the information that they need. So I really do believe that we need to do more groundwork to reach these students. We need to reach them in K through 12. Maybe not so much K through 12, but at least from 6th to 8th grade before they get into high school, so that they can have a track as to where they need to go for those students. And then reaching out to the businesses as well. What do the employers need and what's lacking in the businesses? And then going out to the business and talking to, to their employees, giving, there's other ways of doing things besides just media. And that's just I don't know if anybody else has anything else, please, I want us to succeed. I want my community and, to excel. I want them to achieve this. It's very important for us.
Dr. Hay?
Yeah, so thanks, Maria, for that. I think there's a comprehensive advertising plan, though. It's not just billboards. I think Chancellor Lambert and his team can give us a full detail of all the different ways they reach out to all the different communities in different ways. So it's fairly comprehensive from what I understand. Is that correct, Lee and Dolores?
So our strategy has been very comprehensive. So take, for example, just that whole working adult population. We interact with more companies today than we've ever have. And we've been working with the companies who really wanted to structure things that were unique to their employees. So for example, Geico, we have a very strong customizable program in the business area for Geico employees. We've been doing that for a lot of small, medium-sized businesses. SAMP is an example of that, Southern Arizona Manufacturing Partnership. So then on the high school side of the equation, we have, at one point in time, before my time and before any member of the board's time, the college eliminated its high school recruitment efforts. We reinstated that, and then we also have now added a dual enrollment team. So we have put a lot more emphasis on that ground game now than we ever have. So we're doing all of those pieces. But I think to your point, Maria, that there's more we can do, but some of it is resource and the allocation of the resource. Some of it is, do we have relevant programs? So I'll give you an example. Our cybersecurity program, we just brought that online just a few years back. I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but the enrollment is up over 146%. So some of the solution isn't just about the ground game or it's about having programs that are attractive to the learners and that will ultimately generate, the outcomes too. So I want us not to lose sight that it's a comprehensive approach. It's not just one piece versus another. So very good question, Meredith.
Because it's also not just getting people into the pipeline, it's also helping them succeed.
Yes,
When
right.
11%, which is significantly better, is a dismal 2-year outcome. I mean, we have to do better. I mean, 11% it's almost a statistical rounding error. Like, we need to really shift and move to the 20, 30, 40%. We really need, and we know all of the reasons why it is complicated and difficult. We talked about it at length, but each person has their own challenges, whether it's their family or their work, or they're taking one class and they're not fully enrolled. But what can we do as an institution within our limited scope to push that number even higher? Clearly what we are doing is working. I'm hoping. I mean, and that's one of the things that, I think to Maria's question earlier, to Ms. Garcia's question, when we didn't see that, when we don't see the actual number, like how much is the number increasing? Or are we seeing, a basic flat line and we're just seeing our enrollment teetering, which is changing that percentage. But moving that, I think, is really, really, really key. And, how do we do it? Where do we make the investments? How do we make the revolutionized goal to really aggressively do it now? Because if not now, when?
When? Yeah.
Great, thank you. Are there other comments from the board on Achieve 60 Pima County? I heard support from the board members that spoke. Is that accurate for the other members as well?
Mr. Gonzalez? You're muted if you are. Okay. Mr. Gonzalez? Okay.
All right. So I'll proceed if it works for the board. So let's move on to kind of the second topic. The second topic, though, is directly related to the first, because we talk more about some of the methods the college has been using to think through the future of the institution. And it starts to speak to some of the topics that were just mentioned, and also the discussion from the board meeting last week, when there's talk about different priorities. How do we focus on enrollment? Where do we drive change? And how do we make significant change and improvement of the institution? So let me share my screen again. All right, so let me give you a little bit of detail about the planning process of the institution and share with you some of the new things that we're starting to do. So when we engaged in planning last time around, we leveraged the planning process from the Society of College and University Planning, SCUP. This is a fairly widely used off-the-shelf planning template, and it includes a number of different elements to the planning process, including those listed here. So through the assessing the landscape phase, which is really where action items are developed through this planning model, there's some prep work that's done, thinking about readiness for change, developing a strategic planning team, and identifying the stakeholders. As a note, the membership of the planning team is fairly diverse. We identified a key group of stakeholders, and we actually invited volunteers from each of those stakeholder groups. In addition, I didn't mention this before for mission, though it's accurate for mission and the strategic plan. Both of those will be components in the 2021 Futures Conference, so we can build in community input for both of those processes. But it includes fairly standard elements, the environmental scan, institutional context, competitor analysis, and the SWOT analysis, as I mentioned earlier. Now, none of these things are bad processes to do. Indeed, we're doing all of them as part of the planning process, but it's not really a process that is really responsive enough for the rapidly changing world in which we live. And for that reason, we have branched out and we're expanding our planning process to use new methods. Now, this is a visual just to give you a little bit of a sense of the pace of change. It used to be, go back a few years now, that change was like this S-shaped curve. There would be a change, there would be a period of transition, and then there would be a period of stability for a while, a number of years oftentimes. These days, in part, large part, driven by changes in technology, but the increasingly global world in which we live, which is in part fueled again by the technology. What we're seeing now is a fairly rapid series of improvements. We don't really get that change and then period of stability. Change is pretty well constant, and there is always something new going on that we need to respond to. And it's really because of that the traditional old school strategic planning doesn't really quite get us to where we need to be anymore. And this is a quote from a Forbes article. This is from a number of months ago now. This was early in the fall. And I won't read through all of this, but it's some challenges. With challenges to the cost of college, public support for higher education, doubts about the work readiness of students, and a ton of college alternatives cropping up each day, it's incumbent upon university leaders or community college leaders in our case, to shift their priorities, time, resources, and incentives towards scaling the experiences that matter the most. And this relates to some of the items that I mentioned at the board meeting last week, when we talked about increases in competition, the declining value of college education. These are all factors that are working against us. And within that competitive landscape of other institutions being able to offer their educational products to students within our community, it creates this very complex landscape in which we need to live. So traditional planning, as I was just talking about with the SCUP model, tends to look at the current situation and looks backwards to try and determine the route forwards. Now, for a time, that would fine for higher education planning, but because of this pace of change, we can't really rely on those methods anymore. And there's a suite of approaches under the umbrella of Foresight methods. And these look forward. So they take the current situation today, but rather than using that to go, oh, well, we need to have a strategy on fill in the blank thing. It's a suite of tools you can use to take today's current situation and try and think through possible future states. And then build a series of these possible future possibilities and leveraging those to try and think through the decisions that we need to make today. So partnered with things like the SCUP model, it gets us very well positioned as we think about planning, because we have that traditional deep understanding that we develop through traditional planning. And then we have these forward-looking methods we can use to try and think through how different changes may play out, so we can think about what that means for our community, and then use that to drive our decisions. So they focus really on building compelling visions of the future environment. Now, this isn't about predicting the future, and it isn't the case where there is one vision of the future that you build through these processes. You build several, and you can use those possible end states to make the decisions that will move us towards that future state that we ideally want to be able to see. Very important to note, the scenarios developed through these methods are rooted in today's reality. This is not about just like making things up. When we use a method from the Institute for the Future, and when they talk about this, they'll say, you know, there's no aliens, there's no magical fix to problems. It's all things that are in place today. There might be little tiny clues, but how they may play out going forwards. And then, as noted here, these possible futures are brought to life through, they talk about artifacts, which are like objects or things that might exist, and stories. of people's experiences in those futures to help people connect with them. As a species, we're really not very good about thinking about the future, be it for ourselves or where we work. So they have a suite of ways to help people connect with the future. And stories is one of the ways in which they do that. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Well, I'm going to stop the slides rather. I'll continue sharing my screen. What I'm going to do is play a 5-minute video for you. This will give you the sense of how these methods work and kind of an example of an end case. So you're going to watch a video which was developed by IFTF working with Blue Cross Blue Shield, thinking about the future of work and what that might mean for healthcare. Let me go here, we'll go full screen. And hopefully the volume and everything works. If there's any issues with the sound, please let me know. Then otherwise, we'll watch this.
I'm 26 years old and I'm currently a student, well, trying to be a student at Highland Park Community College, the digital campus. I'm studying digital care coordination and I'm a mom too. This is Leo. He's 3 years old, adorable and a handful. Actually learned our routine, so he helps me put the things aside and move the seats down. Sometimes he just is like waiting, like, mommy, it's brush your teeth. That's what he says for brushing your teeth. It's brush your teeth time, and he's waiting for like with all the things. I'm definitely proud of everything he's seen mommy do. You know, he sees me go to work, he comes to work with me. What do I do for work? I am a waitress, and I also work the night shift at a 24-hour daycare here in town, and I am in college. Let me see. Last time I used my vehicle for transportation, I guess maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I own a 2015 Jeep. I haven't driven it in years because I have a great spot at Golden State Safe Parking Lot on Merced near the freeway. Like, do you know where that is, right? Okay. Yeah. Currently, we just pay about $10 a night, so I really can't complain about the cost. Some of the kids stay all night, but most of the kids arrive between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. We call them our night babies. Oh, they all love it. Their parents have long commutes and early shifts, so they drop them off really early. And at the place where I work, we get the kids ready for school. And then we pick them up too. I mean, I don't work that shift, but some of the kids do get picked up after school and they even eat dinner there. So yeah, those parents, they like never see their kids out of pajamas. I think most of the people whose kids go to our daycare live in like fixed homes, but I still feel lucky because Leo comes to work with me. The management wasn't always cool with that, but after it was so hard for immigrants to get work, they couldn't really find enough workers, so they had to become very flexible and allow us to bring our kids to work. One of my coworkers brings all of his 3 kids to work with him. And why do I want to live here? I mean, I've 100% embraced the home is where you park mentality. So I think I've created a nice vehicular home for Leo and me. But he's getting older, so I want him to be a part of a community, you know? I love the community aspect at the Evergreen Car Park Cooperative. I love that there's Wi-Fi and I won't have to go to the park or the library to go and be able to do my schoolwork. But the major reason that I want to live at the co-op is because you're pro-family of all kinds. There is no shame on having a vehicular residency. And I want my son to be proud of his family. And I don't need anyone's judgment on my choice of where and how I choose to raise him.
Okay, so I'm going to pause that for just a moment. That gives you an example of one of the scenarios, in this case, built through IFTF. I'm going to transition back to the slides, but I was curious to hear from the board if you have any reactions. What do you think about this as a way to think about the future through these kinds of stories?
Ms. Garcia?
I'm going to tell.
You're,
Okay, so
no, you're still muted. You're muted. There you go.
okay, I have actually seen that in California, where people were trying to find parking spots in their residential neighborhoods because they could not afford housing. And it's very sad that we have that kind of that here in America, we have to do that. And a lot of them were professionals. They just could not afford to pay for their housing. And I believe that here in Tucson, we have a lot of that with people that could do more if they could afford to go to school. So, you know, it breaks my heart.
So you find it an effective tool to be able to, you know, elicit conversation and through this type of sort of visioning.
Yeah. Because, you know, you have to give them a vision. You know, if they're in a bad situation, if they can't afford, you know, they don't have a livable wage. And there's a lot of people, I think I had mentioned before that in South Tucson, 70% of the residents are that way. You know, and so I believe we have to do more outreach, but you also have to, they don't know any other way of living. They don't know if any other opportunities. So I still will stress that we need to show them that and educate them on that, letting them know that there's the availability and what it will mean to them if they go to school and they get a skill. So yeah, it's effective.
Thank you for those comments.
So Nick, what are you getting at? Are you asking about how we deliver content to a diverse student population? What are you looking for here? I mean, I'm not sure what your question was really, quite frankly.
Okay, well, this was just an example of some of the way the scenarios can go together. And there's more content I'm going to talk through about the background for this. I was just curious to see if there were any reactions based on the video. In terms of, they took some data points, as you perhaps noticed. They talked about some of the current statistics on people in particular circumstances, and then projected those forward to 2030 to see what that thinks. So I was just curious about whether using stories in this way resonate with the board, if you think that is an interesting direction.
Well, I think it's interesting, but I think what's more important is to get the demographics of our student population. How many are homeless? How many have children? How many have homes, you know, and what are the different ways of delivering content so they can finish their degrees or their certificates in ways that best for them. I think showing video is interesting. I don't think it's necessarily helpful about how we actually think about delivering content and being as flexible as we possibly can for our different diversity, our diverse student populations, no matter where they live. So it's one way to talk about, I think, our student population, but it's not certainly the only way.
Dr. Richmond, I mean, this is really part of what you're proposing as part of a visioning strategy. So if we were to think about it in terms of our community, we know that our extreme climate conditions are going to impact the future of our institution. So we would, provide some sort of template or tool, video tool, to talk about how that could theoretically impact. That's sort of what you're talking about, this not really as a marketing tool, but really as a discussion, sort of a point of departure as part of a planning exercise.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
So can I add, because I think what this is really showing us, these are the individuals in our community. Look at the challenges they face. So if we want them to be able to come to Pima, we're going to have to change how we do our work in order to be attractive to that individual. How do we fit into their lives? So the video allows our folks to understand the lives of our students better. Because I think we still are too much a one size fit all. Everyone's got to go through the same process and to get what they need, instead of maybe we need to conform to their lives a little better and make it easier to come to Pima. And that means changing up what we do. And PLA, prior learning assessment, is an example of that. Acknowledging people's lives, allowing them to get credit for their lived experience, provided that they can demonstrate that through our different assessment strategies, is an example of adapting to the learner versus making the learner adapt to us.
Oh, sure, absolutely. But I don't think I've ever seen demographics of how many of our students are homeless. And I guess that's the wrong term, because obviously choosing to live in your vehicle is a choice for that particular video we just saw. But that's an interesting point, because I don't remember ever seeing that demographic.
And I'll see what information we have for Pima County.
We can try to get better data on that.
If it matters, I don't know if it matters, other than what do our students need in terms of getting the content. I mean, if the student still wants to be a nurse, they still have to go to a physical facility.
Ultimately, they will have to, yes.
But if they want a certificate in early childhood education, that can certainly be done online, I think.
And at a workplace. So that's the other piece of this, right? So the work-based learning becomes an important part of that. So that's why we've been trying to scale work-based learning. But that will require us to go to the workplace instead of having them come to us. And that means more faculty going out to the workplaces or connecting with the workplaces, as an example.
Right.
But I think one of the things that's interesting in this, and it's sort of for this discussion, I have talked to our colleagues on boards in California, and they are dealing with this. And this is a really stark issue that's going on. And it may not be an issue in Tucson today, but the cost of housing continues to outpace wages. I mean, we know all of these different factors are at play, and we may see this in the coming decade. And I think
there's no question, Damon, there's no question, but it's not like 50% of our students are living in their cars.
No, but
I think we need to know the data. We don't have any data. We're speculating. The second thing I would ask would be to Bruce is, what are the guardrails that the Higher Learning Commission puts on us in terms of the different ways we can deliver content and still test that they've learned the content? That's really going to be really, really important as we go forward, as I understand it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, these are great points. So I'm going to go back and share my screen and move through the rest of the materials and then get into our last discussion. And I'm going to try and change the settings so I can see you this time. This is capturing sound. Okay, here we go. I can see you all now. That's great. Okay, good. So I'm going to explain a few of the background terms. These are terms you will hear us using at the institution as we move forward with the Foresight work that we're doing. And then we're going to switch over into Mural and have a conversation about one particular futures topic that has been emerging as a priority from a number of different groups. So I want to mention 4 basic Foresight terms. So there are drivers and signals that are used to develop forecasts and scenarios. Now, a driver, this is a large, long-term direction of change. This is something where there is abundant evidence that a given change is playing out. There's really no debate about whether it's actually a thing or a change or not. The impact may be unclear, but it's kind of an unarguable fact that it's a change that's going on in society. They can be really diverse. There can be many of them. And so oftentimes this STEEP system is used. So looking at social, technological, economic, etc. categories. Now, one that I would single out as a driver that we need to think about is the growth in online. Now, we're looking at course enrollment. So this is duplicated by students across classes. And we're just looking from fall 2016 through to fall 2020. Now, fall 2020, as we know, is an anomalous year because we have the pandemic going on. But you'll notice, even pre-pandemic, over the previous four semesters, we've seen this gradual ongoing increase in online enrollment. This is, I would say, a fairly clear trend that we're experiencing institutionally, and it's certainly not unique to us. This is a trend that's impacting other institutions as well. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that these are not local students taking the classes, but be it for convenience, for scheduling reasons, there is a popularity to online classes that we need to be aware of moving forward. And I'd identify this as a driver. Now, a signal is a little bit different. A signal is a little small clue. It might be a data point. It might be a new practice that a particular institution is trying out, but it's a little sign of a potential change. Now, it's early in the life of this small local innovation. It may fizzle out. It may turn into nothing. It could turn into a big major trend impacting education or impacting our community. So these are harder to spot. And again, there can be many of these as well. And the challenge is thinking through which of these possible signs of change is actually going to become something that's significant, or which of them are things where, you know what, maybe not. And it's really by looking comprehensively across the drivers, across the signals. The articles that Chancellor Lambert sends out is directly relevant to this because many of those are examples of little kind of innovative changes in particular areas that may become full-blown items we need to consider. At the Wednesday board meeting, I mentioned the course numbers for MOOCs. Early in the day, people thought MOOCs might just be this temporary thing that wouldn't catch on and they wouldn't become this large enrollment engines. Well, of course they are. They're hugely popular through the various different platforms. And so that's something that back in like 2012, that might have been a little kind of like, oh, there's these platforms starting these courses. And we've seen how in a fairly short space of time, they've become really significant. Now, the
Can I follow up on that? Can I ask a question, Nick, just quickly? As they become more popular, though, and students come in and take these small focused courses or whatever, does that make our completion numbers even worse? Because they're just taking a course and not actually a degree program or certificate program?
The challenge, I would say, when I think about MOOCs from the point of view of Pima, is through these platforms, students can go take very focused education on a particular topic. So the assessment is arguably sometimes a little weak, but they're not beholden to the same standards as us. So there aren't contact hours, there is not, some of them I think you can get financial aid through them, but you can sign up and in 4 weeks, you can complete training on a particular topic. So this could be the case where we may lose students completely because they don't come to Pima at all and they go to one of the online MOOC providers and get the education they need that way. Also, moving forward, we all know this, right? Work changes all the time. People constantly need to reskill. And it could be that we have people who complete, say, an IT degree with us, and then they go get their refresher training in new tools and techniques through Udemy or Coursera, and they don't come back to us for that updated skills training. So there's a few different ways I can see that these platforms can impact us, where we could lose people completely, or we miss that lifelong learning opportunity and reskilling opportunity that we would otherwise have. So using the drivers and the signals, there are techniques that can be used. There are templates and methods that we can use to build forecasts, which is a statement about a possible future. These forecasts need to be plausible and internally consistent. IFTF, the Institute for the Future, often says the forecast should be provocative. They should raise questions. It's not really about having a forecast of the future so you can go, oh, we can predict the future, this is going to happen. But it's really to drive conversation and drive creativity and kind of idea generation about what we might do. I've mentioned this before, but these things have to be grounded in present day facts. So this isn't just about making stuff up. It's who we are today. What are these drivers? What are these signals? What do these changes maybe mean? And it's essentially a qualitative statement about a likely change in direction. Then we get to scenarios. A scenario is a full-blown description of a future state that builds in lots of complex series of changes. So it involves many drivers, many signals, many forecasts. And as we know, things don't happen in isolation. All of these different challenges are all interconnected. And so the scenario is where you try and build all these different forecasts and think, what is the world likely to look like 10, 15, 20 years down the road? As noted here, they often come in multiples of 3 or 4. There are a number of different types of scenario that you can build. Some are transformational, and this is where a new way of doing business emerges and the whole industry kind of shifts. They can also be collapse scenarios, where something changes and fundamentally changes in not necessarily a positive direction. And there's a suite that might be prepared around these. But the whole point is to give people a way to think through possible future states and then think about, what does this mean for our institution? What does it mean for our students? And what do we need to do today to be ready for that possible future state? So the way we're using these methods at the college, so we're embedding them in the strategic planning process. We've had a number of conversations with the strategic planning team already, identifying drivers, signals, and talking through possible implications of those things. And through those conversations, a common topic that's emerged is the future of competition in higher education. And that's actually the topic that we'll come back to a little bit later. Competition in higher education is really interesting because it touches the degrees we offer, the different awards we offer, how we offer them. It raises questions about how we more fully engage with dual enrollment. Is there potential for people to complete an award as part of their dual enrollment time so they're that bit further forward in their college career? And so that's an interesting topic that's been looked at quite a bit. We've also had a half-day session with the executive leadership team, and there's been a session with the joint leadership team over academics and student affairs. And of course, we're introducing these topics to the board today as to raise your awareness of these methods. So when we come forward as part of the strategic planning process, you're aware of how we have engaged in this work. So we have at this point developed a catalog of drivers and signals, though we constantly are building that out because there are new things all the time. And we've been working to identify questions of interest to think about as we consider the future. One example I would share that came up through the work with the executive leadership team is thinking about the future of education if the requirement for accreditation goes away. And if there is a change in that regulatory requirement and expectation, what would that mean for the institution moving forward? And as noted here, we've been working in a collaborative tool called Mural for this work. In an ideal world, we'd be together in a room, we'd have like the flip charts out, we'd be all doing that kind of thing. But because we can't in this situation, we've shifted to an online platform that gives us the same kind of capabilities. This is just an example from the session from the executive leadership team, where they've been identifying drivers, signals, identifying questions, and drafting a scenario. And I realize this is small, you don't need to read this, but the one thing I would highlight, I put to the executive leadership team the statement: in 15 years, the community will still value associate degrees, and had them chime in on whether they agree with that statement or disagree. And you'll notice there's a cluster towards the disagree end of that spectrum. And as a community college, this is a very real question we have to ask ourselves. as we move forward, in this case, I was asking them about Pima in 2035, what educational product is going to bring value to our students? Do they need an associate's degree? Do they need to learn key skills and competencies for a particular work direction that they wish to go? What does this look like? And this is, of course, a very fundamental question for an educational institution, but the path we set ourselves on through the next strategic plan, and as we think about Achieve 60, there are key questions in there to think about what's valuable and what's important for our students. So I'm going to exit here and go in, oh, if I can get to it around the Zoom menu, let me try here, and go in here. Okay, so as part of the board meeting materials, we shared a PDF, and also within the agenda, there is a link, should people wish to use it, to visit this mural board. Now, the purpose today is not by any means to go through all the details. I wanted to share this so the board has access to the drivers, the signals, the questions to explore that the institution has identified as part of this process. And if you have questions, if you have input on any of these topics, of course, that's very welcome. What I do want to do, though, is focus on this area here. So as part of the work, as I mentioned, one of the themes that has emerged is the future of competition in higher education. And within these essentially post-it notes within this area, you can see a number of the topics that have stood out. Now, these are combined from the strategic planning team and the executive leadership team. We've pulled these together. Some of them you might spot have similar topics within them, but you'll notice some of the different things in here. What if 75% of our enrollment comes from fully online courses? Increasing alternatives to traditional higher education. What are the good ones to mention in here? Increase in industry-specific certifications through industry-specific examinations. What does that mean potentially for the institution in terms, again, of what we offer? Now, as mentioned already, as a topic, thinking about competition in higher education raises a whole world of questions, really covering all aspects of the student life cycle. How do we engage with our students in an increasingly competitive landscape? How do we ensure that we connect meaningfully with those students and provide the support they need to be successful? And of course, we need to remember, while our online offerings are available to anybody who wants to leverage them, the vast majority of our students are in Pima County. Through Achieve 60 Pima County, we have a strong local focus. And so how do we leverage our geographic coexistence with our students to ensure we are enhancing their experience and supporting their success at the institution? So you have access to these items through the board materials, and you have the link. But what I wanted to open this up to is a discussion to hear from the board. So through these methods and through many different discussions, the future of competition is key. So some of the questions highlighted here are some of the things we need to think about. How do we offer classes in this competitive landscape? What kind of awards do we need to offer? What does this mean in terms of transfer education and general education? I believe this was mentioned by possibly two of the board, Amazon University. It feels like it's just a question of time until some of these really big entities move into the education space. And transfer education is hugely important, but it's also easy to picture a future state where some of our general education classes, which, I mean, they're largely the same from college to college, with uniqueness brought by the instructor, but it's easy to see those things being sucked up by a big institution. And of course, partnerships with the community is key. All framed within the two questions I mentioned earlier in the session. How do we substantially increase Pima's completion rate? How do we close the achievement gap? Now, the planning team is having challenging conversations about this, thinking through these questions, thinking through how we make progress. But as we move forward into the planning process, which of course we will bring back to the board for discussion and approval, what are the thoughts of the board on this topic as we move forward.
Let me see, where am I at?
Ms. Garcia, we can hear you. And then I just also want to remind everybody, it's almost 5:20. We're going to take a pause at 5:30 for just a moment of silence, but we do have another item. So, you know, we do need to sort of wrap up the conversation too. So Ms. Garcia, please.
Okay. I guess, you know, one of the things that I think about is on how we offer classes. You know, a couple of things that come to my thoughts are that are the students going to want to be paying $84 a credit hour for online classes? That's number one. Number two, what's available? You know, and you know, I think where we're more competitive is that Pima offers the student more of a one-to-one kind of interaction than they would at a university or even some of these other schools. But the thing that the competition has that we don't do as well, I believe, this is just my opinion, is that they get them through quickly. So students would rather go pay for a nurse's aid certification from one of these institutions because it's quicker. And that's something that we need to consider. How do we develop our courses so that they get the same thing, but in a shorter period of time? And then, of course, like I said, again, it's the cost and it's the support. Those are my thoughts.
And those are great comments, Maria. I would add to ensure we maintain quality.
Yes.
Because fast without quality is not very useful. Nick, what do we mean by awards that we offer? What is an award? You're talking about financial aid award, or?
That's a great question. In this context, what it's referring to is certificates, associate degrees. But I would expand this further as we think through the future of the institution. We offer some industry credentials, which have value to the students as they go seeking work. So while we don't track them internally as formal awards currently, I see industry credentials as important as well. There's also a possibility, and this will depend somewhat on the state level implications of Achieve 60, but there's discussion about the potential for including non-credit completions within this as well. So there's a lot of scope for us to think through what that means as we move forward.
Thank you.
I mean, I would say, I would just challenge us that it really, you know, ultimately, you know, the board's role shouldn't be to say when and where we should do this. Our students should, the ones who actually need each and every one of these things should be telling us, and we need to figure out how to respond more rapidly to meet all of these needs. If people are saying, you know, ultimately, if we go out and we really find, we're through surveys or various works, we find out that, you know, 20% of 5% of students want, you know, classes at 11 o'clock at night, we may or may not be able to do that. But if 90% are saying, oh, they need 5 o'clock classes, you know, maybe that's where we should be really shifting to. Same with, I mean, each and every one of these, I think we're on the right track. It's the industry and better understanding what the students need. I'm not sure if we are engaging with students enough to really understand, and we're rapidly moving to those changes that we know or that we've heard need to be made. But that's what I would really challenge us, is that it's really not really us to define these things, but really the marketplace.
I want to add one more thing that Meredith had mentioned about the quality of what we're offering. Okay, I know that out there in industry, when people get, like, say, for example, a nurse's aid training program or whatever, the people that they go to work for, you know, they would rather have a Pima student than some of these other schools. And so if we could advertise that as well, and you know, and put it out there so that people can see it, and then look at the businesses that take in the students for these different careers, you know, and they can talk about, you know, how Pima is turning out better students. I think that would be a really good selling point, and that would bring more students in. And then the potential for them making more money because they have a better quality education.
Okay. Dr. Richmond and Mr. Gonzalez, do you have any last comments?
Is he there?
It says he's there. Mr. Gonzalez, so you're on mute if you're. Okay, Dr. Richmond. So
Damien, can I just kind of add a kind of
Hello?
a parting?
yes, Mr.
Oh,
Gonzalez.
no, go ahead, Luis.
Sorry about that. I'm on my phone and it's not working as good as my computer, my laptop. I mean, I just wanted to say there's a lot of excellent information that we're sharing here, but one of the things I need to come back is not only the recruitment but also the retention of the students, because in looking at the graphs and everything, and in my experience that I've had, I also believe that we really need to promote the community. And by the community, I also mean the students. The students, their own nuclear family, their family, how many siblings went and took Pima classes. That's what we also need to promote. Because I don't think I know that once we reach families, not only one students, but families, I think we can at least double or triple the amount of people that are interested, that are engaged, and have that sense of belonging in the community, within the community college. Because the sense of belonging for our people in the community, La Raza, I think that's what they need. We need to tap into the families, not necessarily one student by one student, but families. Because as we all know, families are from 7 to 8 people. But I think that's one area that we need to look at, but be more of for the families to have a sense of belonging within the Pima College as well. But I like not only the recruitment and the advertising, but also we need to do more of the retention of all students as well.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Gonzalez. Chancellor Lambert, do you want to maybe 1 minute, or do we want to do we want to move it to sort of this moment and then return to this, or what do you want to?
We can move into the moment, and then I'll offer some just parting comment. Now, Andrea, if you sent us all a link to a candle.
No, I think we're going to do it a little bit differently. I think.
Okay, go ahead.
Provost is going to lead us in actually lighting a candle. Today marks a very grim milestone for our nation. Today, over 400,000 people have died as a result of COVID. And to mark this with a moment of silence to acknowledge and recognize that loss, not just for the nation, but for our city and our state and our college, frankly. I'd like to, this is an initiative that is being pushed and organized by the Biden administration. And I'd like to hand it over to Dolores Duran-Certa, our provost, who is going to light a candle, and then we'll have a small moment of silence.
Thank you, Chairperson Klinko. So this is to commemorate and honor and remember those who have passed away from COVID. I think this is the first time that we're actually acknowledging and honoring their passing and remembering them. So I have a candle here and I will light it, and we will follow that with a moment of silence as we remember them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chancellor Lambert, do you want to wrap up our last conversation and then we can move in?
Yes. So let me just say this. Thank you, Dolores. And so if you get a chance, you may want to view some of the shots from Washington, D.C., where they have a flag, U.S. flag for every fallen person as a result of COVID-19. Also, the college has lit all of its buildings and other lighting that is more of a yellowish lighting. So we're hoping to take photos of that and share with everyone if we're able to capture that. So what I wanted to close on was, so Marina Gorbis, who's the executive director for the Institute for the Future, they finalized an ethnographic study of workers in California, low-wage workers in California. One of the things that they found was they don't really have time to go to school because every day is a new day to go find a job. Every day is a new day to make a living. So where they're spending their time to remake themselves, they're going to places like TikTok to learn how to keep themselves relevant to get that job the next day. I mean, now how much of that is migrating over to Tucson in our region? I don't know yet. Just know that that's happening in places like California. And so our challenges are huge, but I think the opportunities are huger. And we will stay focused on being mindful of those opportunities and really learning to adapt. And as our provost likes to say, we now need to adapt the college to the learner instead of requiring the learner to adapt to the college. And I think ultimately that's where we're headed. So I'm with that, I think we're closed out for this session.
Thank you very much, Chancellor Lambert. The next item is the item 3.2, which is our centralized procurement and board report processes. Chancellor Lambert.
Yes, so we wanted to have Terry Robinson, who's our director over procurement, to come in and just share a little bit about what we do from a procurement process, so the board has just a little greater understanding of how we go about procuring services for the institution. So Terry, I'll turn it over to you.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chancellor. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone, give a brief overview of our college's centralized procurement and board report process for acquisitions. So this won't be a very long presentation, but I certainly encourage you to let me know if you have any questions as I go through this with you. So starting with this, the centralized procurement services that we offer here at the college, basically, as you all know, the board we've adopted as a college the centralized procurement process, and what that involves is making sure that we are following our APs, the administrative procedures currently in place, as well as our college, as well as the federal code as well with regard to procedures for procurement. That code is CFR Part 200. And what that involves is the purchasing of all goods and services, which would include general goods, services, as well as construction for the college. Only purchases that are conducted or made through a purchase order process, as well as the use of a college-approved P card, are authorized purchases. Other than additionally, we can order or make purchases through the supply order office supply program that we have, and those are considered approved purchases as well. One of the most important elements of our centralized process is the fact that we do have procurement thresholds in place that are based upon CFR Part 200. And those thresholds fall in this order. We have the micro purchases as well as simplified acquisition threshold, and those purchases that are made that are above that simplified acquisition threshold amount. And then each of these categories determines what methodology we utilize in completing those purchases. In particular for micro purchases, those purchases that fall under $10,000, those purchases are the ones that do not exceed $10,000. And the primary focus there when making those purchases is making sure that we show that fair and reasonable pricing, that evidence of fair and reasonable pricing has been demonstrated for those purchases. Doesn't really matter how low that dollar amount might be. We obviously want to make sure that the pricing that we pay is fair and reasonable for those goods or services. If it is over 10,000, but less than 250,000, we want to make sure that those purchases are done through a competitive purchasing process. In particular, we might utilize informal purchasing. We might utilize quotes in order to show that a competitive process was utilized for those purchases. And we can utilize cooperative contracting as well. For those purchases that are greater than $250,000, those purchases are obviously, it is very important and crucial that we adhere to and be compliant with a formalized solicitation process for those types of purchases. And that also includes the use of cooperative contracts that fall into that category. And one of the biggest elements that's involved for those types of purchases is the fact that we do require governing board approval for those purchases. So this is just a reminder about signature authority. One of the biggest things that I try to make sure that everyone is aware of within the college is we need to adhere with our administrative procedures with regard to signature authority, and that the only individuals that are allowed to sign purchasing related binding contracts are those who have the appropriate signature authority. For the most part, that resides with our centralized procurement office. As it states here as well, depending on the level of the purchase, that might involve the chancellor signing or the chancellor granting the authority that's been granted to him through the board to other individuals such as Dave B. or myself, to be able to sign off on certain types of purchases that exceed that $250,000 level. The next area that I wanted to take a few minutes to just talk about is to make sure everyone is aware of and clear about the board report process. This is what involves those purchases that are over the $250,000 threshold and require board approval, and what that actually looks like, how we go about taking the process we go through to make sure that you have the opportunity to review what is being requested for those purchases that exceed that $250,000 mark. First and foremost, these three bullets just indicate that the procurement department holds that authority and a responsibility of making sure that we handle the board reports appropriately, that we are the ones responsible for getting those board reports submitted. And as a part of that process, it's very important that we collaboratively work with various departments such as facilities or IT to work collaboratively on putting together those board reports that you ultimately end up seeing. And this last slide here just kind of breaks down the process and gives you a quick overview of what that would look like. So on the left side of the screen, what you're seeing is at the very top on the left is a breakdown of what the board reports typically look like when we're asking for approvals for those purchases. You'll see that they have the recommendation. There's a justification for what is being purchased. We talk about the vendor selection process, what we went through in making a determination as to the compliant methodology used to choose the vendor who will be providing the goods or services that we're asking for, what the financial considerations look like, and when necessary, how the strategic plan or HLC accreditation criteria might be tied in with what is being actually purchased. Underneath that are some examples of the types of supporting documentation that would also be provided with that board report. Formal solicitation or a co-op contract, for example. Now, on the right side of the screen, this is just a representation of typically what happens in the submission process for the board report. And to make sure that our various customers keep in mind the due dates, when we have to get the report in and ready for presentation, and to make sure that they keep that in mind as a part of the timing for their solicitation and what they would like to have awarded with regards to the contract for the goods and services that are in question. And then also we have here as listed below the timing with regard to when it's due and what should happen in the event that the department does not have, we don't have all the sort of ducks in a row necessary to present this to the board, and the fact that that needs to then, it needs to be considered for the next round or the next scheduled board meeting to be considered. So with that being said, I'll just open it up for questions.
Yes, yeah, yes.
Okay, so I'm so glad you made this presentation. So let me I do have some questions. One of them is I'd just like to know what the protocol for vendors and college employees is when a vendor, what is the, when a vendor approaches the college with an interest in doing business, what is the protocol?
Well, generally speaking, it depends on, of course, what it is that the vendor is offering, what it is that they're asking to provide, the cost of what those services are, and their relationship to the thresholds for purchasing. But just generally speaking, we want to be fair, open, transparent, and generally what we do in our department is we will ask those vendors, depending on what it is that they're offering, to speak with the various departments about those goods or services that they're interested in offering in order for the vendor to make a direct connection with various departments. For example, with facilities, that's one of the more common areas that we have vendors who are interested in doing business with the college. If they are interested in providing a service, for example, we might, after initially screening and speaking with that vendor, we will then put them in touch with an appropriate individual in facilities to have them speak with them about those products and services that they're interested in offering. Another thing that we do is with those vendors who may be reaching out to us with interest in doing business with the colleges, we will let them know about current contracts that we have with other vendors, and see if there are like products or services that they're interested in offering, and try to get an understanding of what exactly they're offering and what kind of threshold or category they may fall into with regard to what they're offering. So for example, if it's less than $10,000, they're simply calling because they're interested in providing a contract, good, or service that might cost, say, $1,000 for the purchase by a particular department, and the department might have an interest in actually making that purchase. The department can certainly do business with those individuals, and the only thing that would be primarily required in their wanting to work with them, it would simply be making sure that the pricing is fair and reasonable as to what it is that they're offering to purchase. However, if the contract that the vendor is offering has a total contract value, let's say, that exceeds $10,000 and is less than $250,000, as the previous slides that I showed before have our threshold amounts. Right. If it's within between 10 and 250, now we have to make sure that we are utilizing a competitive process. Okay. It can be an informal process, but it must be competitive. And that is in accordance with not only our general AP, but also to make sure that we are compliant with federal guidelines that we must adhere with. So that means that that vendor who was interested, we generally make sure that they understand that we will need to get quotes from other vendors who are interested, or others that are out in that particular field of service, in order to find out if they have competitive pricing, also to vet those vendors and make sure that they are qualified and able to provide the services that they're actually offering. Now, when we're talking about a vendor who's interested in providing services for a contract that exceeds $250,000, that's where a formal solicitation process must be followed. At that point, we must look at doing formal solicitations where we bid and allow for greater opportunity for those vendors who are interested in providing those particular services. We go through a formal RFP, for example, or a request for qualifications, or a formal IFB, or request for bids. And those vendors who are interested in providing, then they can actually respond to those formal solicitations that we then advertise on our website, as well as through the news publications as required by state statute.
So my next question is it appropriate for a vendor to be involved with college employees prior to the bid or the RFP process?
I think your question, in the way you frame it, is very much depends upon the circumstances. So I really would have to have a clearer picture of what a circumstance, for example, that
I can give you that. Okay. So I've been concerned about the train contract. So I might as well just state it. And so it is my understanding, through information that I've gotten through emails, that the train contract, that they were involved way before that bid was ever processed, and they had an unfair advantage against other vendors. So, I just find it unethical for that to have happened. And so that's why I'm asking that question. So what was so special about that specific contract that happened?
Well, and that's where I would have to actually beg to differ. That contract was reviewed by independent sources who made sure that, after reviewing our policies and procedures and what actually took place, was a fair, open, and transparent competition for those services that Train ultimately ended up winning. There was nothing that was done out of the ordinary with regard to them winning that award. I would go so far as to perhaps turn it over. I believe Jeff is on our call as well, who can talk about the independent lawyer that was brought in to actually do an assessment of how we went through that solicitation process.
So Terry, before I turn it over, Jeff, can I respond? Because I think there's some context that probably many of you may not even be aware of.
Yes, of course.
If that's okay, Damien.
Yeah,
so since starting at the college, I've had various vendors, not just Train, approach me about doing the very thing that we bidded out, which resulted in Train being the successful bidder. So it wasn't Train talking to the college. There were a number of vendors talking to the college, which is exactly why we went through an RFP process as opposed to a sole source process. And Terry, you may want to talk a little more about what sole source is, or cooperative contracting, because that is an option, but I didn't think that would be fair. And so I said we need to go through this process. So I don't know if Jeff, you wanted to add anything. And by the way, I stayed out of that process once it was initiated.
Well, so thank you, Chancellor. So one thing I would add, and it applies to lots of situations. There are many vendors who do business with the college multiple times over time. So that's why I think when Terry mentions, it depends on the circumstances is true, because there are many vendors who have sold goods or services to the college. So they have a standing relationship with the college, and that at a future date, they again sell additional goods or services to the college. So that's one reason why when it's a large dollar amount involved, that you have the purchasing office involved. So you have an independent set of eyes looking at the transaction, and that we have selection committees running through an RFP process where people who don't necessarily have that relationship with the vendor are part of the selection process and are rating this proposal submitted by the vendor, so that we have some checks and balances in the system, and we have a way to see that there's some independent sets of eyes looking at whatever the particular transaction is. So that's why it's not necessarily uncommon that there's a vendor that's done business with the college on multiple occasions.
Jeff, I understand that, but I also am aware that the train basically picked the steering committee.
So,
that is not true.
So hold on. What I'd say is, if you have information like that, then we should talk and you should provide that, because I'm not aware of that. And we had an independent outside counsel come and take a look at that, and there was no indication of any problem. If, however, you have evidence, then absolutely let's schedule a time and go through that and see whether we need to take another look.
Okay.
What the Chancellor described as well is accurate with regard in general for many of our many purchases or goods and services that come our way. Vendors contact us, as you can imagine, daily. My mailbox is filled with vendors who reach out to us and want to speak with us about the various services that they offer. Many times, and it is acceptable for them to begin conversations with college members and staff, including the Chancellor, but at the right and the appropriate moment in time, those departments must go through the centralized procurement process as outlined here. So simply put, in the sense of the train solicitation, once they got to that point where we were aware of not only train, but many other vendors who were interested in potentially providing the services that train ultimately ended up winning, they went through a formal solicitation RFP process with committee members who were chosen chosen solely by our procurement staff and the departments that we work with to provide us with the evaluation of those RFPs in order to make that award.
Mr. Robinson, this is based on the Uniform Federal Code regulation procurement standards. I'm looking at it on my screen. So can you tell us how, we adopted this federal standard, and then can you tell me ballpark how many micro purchases, are in a given year, how many simplified acquisition threshold procurement are there, and how many greater than the SAT amount there are? Do you have?
No, unfortunately, not off the top of my head, but I certainly would be able to get back with you after we pull some reports and give you accurate numbers as to what that would look like over a given period of time that you might be interested in. If you'd like to know if that was over the past year or over a number of years or even months, I can certainly have those numbers available to you. But I certainly can't tell you off the top of my head what those numbers might look like.
Okay, well, I think that would be useful. I just would be curious to know, because I suspect based on the volume of greater than SAT amounts that we approve each month on our consent agenda or as independent items, I have a sense of how many of those there are, but the simplified acquisition and the micro purchase, I really have no way of sort of understanding the volume that we're moving through. So I'd appreciate it. And then Ms. Garcia, you will get with Jeff over the next week and sit down with him and talk with him about
probably within the next 2 weeks.
Okay, next 2 weeks. Okay, terrific.
Mr. Klinko, did you want that over a 1-year time period, or what was the time element that?
Maybe you could give it over a single year and then maybe a 5-year look back, if that's not too complicated. I mean, I don't want to create a whole, amount of work. But if it's easy to generate, at least 1 year, and then maybe just a 5-year look back. And again, you can just, if you send that to the Chancellor's office, they will make sure that it gets sent out to the board as a follow-up.
All right, thank you.
I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the insight too on how the process works. And
Damien?
Yes, Chancellor Lambert.
Could we have Terry just mention about sole source, because that comes up often, and what it is, and then when one might consider that versus going through this more competitive open process. Terry?
Thank you, Chancellor. Well, sole source requests are fairly frequent. Now, from a federal guidelines perspective, we are very, very stringent with regard to sole source requests. Essentially, a non-competitive waiver must be submitted to substantiate and justify the need for a sole source request, because essentially what you're saying when you ask for a sole source is you're indicating that there is no other provider in the market that can provide the particular goods or services that are being requested, or that there's something so specialized about that particular good or service, it can only come from one source. So that's where that non-competitive justification form needs to be provided with substantial supporting evidence of that. That would come from the requester, as well as procurement doing its due diligence and checking into whether or not what's been presented as supporting evidence is indeed factual with regard to that type of purchase. I would say we do not very often award sole source purchases because of the fact that it is difficult to raise the bar to that level and what's required, especially from a federal perspective, if federal funds are being utilized for that purchase. In those instances, the actual grant funder has to provide, the federal grant funder would need to provide the permissions to make that type of purchase.
Okay.
And Terry, you may want to mention how that differs from a cooperative contract as well.
All right, thank you. So for cooperative contracting, what makes that very unique is that first and foremost, we are able to utilize cooperative contracting compliantly. And not only is it able to be used compliantly, the federal government and federal regulations actually encourage the use of cooperatives because of the fact that cooperative contracts have been vetted competitively. So a number of competitors have gone through the process, an RFP process typically, or some type of formal solicitation process in order to receive the award. We then, as an entity, are able to take advantage of that cooperative process and the pricing that was achieved, as well as the competitive process utilized through that cooperative in order to utilize that contract and not have to spend our time and resources to obtain those services through a formal solicitation process or through informal solicitation. A couple of examples of cooperatives. There are cooperative contracts that we utilize through other public entities. We have the ability and the right to utilize the U of A's contracts, for example. Generally speaking, they are available to us to go and utilize any contract that the U of A has already awarded because they have cooperative language in those contracts for us to utilize. We can utilize, and we frequently utilize, the City of Tucson. We utilize Pima Community Pima County contracts cooperatively on a routine basis. Now then, there are other types of cooperatives that we also may utilize, such as E&I. That's an example of one cooperative. There are literally hundreds of various cooperative pools or associations that put together contracts for public entities. and allow us to utilize those contracts cooperatively. And they've been formally vetted and reviewed to make sure that they will meet our purposes. But those contracts are, that's another opportunity for us to utilize those compliant contracts for our use. And they certainly are, again, encouraged for us to utilize by federal regulation.
Terry, if I could just explain one piece of that. The reason we use those is they're contracts that have been competitively selected by another public entity. So in other words, they went through a competitive process that looks similar to our own. So instead of duplicating the process, we take advantage of the fact that they went through a competitive process for the same type of good or service.
Okay.
We are just ending at our time. Mr. Robinson, I really appreciate you coming and presenting today, because this is of so much interest to the board. Maybe in 6 months, we could have you come back and just give sort of an update on sort of what we are procuring, how the process is continuing to function, and perhaps look at improvements that you think we could make to the system, maybe six months or 8 months down the road from now. In a formal sort of form, to give sort of an overview of what we have done through the simplified acquisition threshold and greater than, as well as the follow-up. Does that?
Yes, that would be my pleasure.
Yeah. Does that work? Does everybody, what's the board's pleasure on that? Is that something we'd like to hear more of?
I'll think about it.
We'll plan on
One
it,
quick,
and then we'll
one
be
quick question with procurement, Mr. Robinson.
Yes, sir.
The procurement process, is it a 3-bid system, correct?
The procurement process is based on what I have